Regarding your earlier question about locations and props and so forth, I mean, everything that you see in the film contributes to how an audience feels. This is all about audience feelings. Film is manipulative. It is completely 100% manipulative, both subliminally and very blatantly. And the role of the director, and then the editor as well, is to get the audience to feel exactly what I want you to feel at exactly a certain point.
So, Paul, let's shoot the questions right away. When we talk about the art and craft of direction, what does it involve? Why do we call it an art?
Yeah, so there's actually, I like to think of both art and craft and a third component of that
Hmm.
as well. And the third component of that would be budgeting and finance.
Uh-huh.
So film is not something that we can do just for free. It's something that
Hmm.
requires money in order to create that art and in order to do your craft. So the role of someone who is a director, producer, creative filmmaker person really requires working in all three areas of both your artistic vision of the story that you want to tell and why you're passionate about telling that story and who it is you want to reach. Who do you want to hear that story and how do you want to affect their lives? That's the art. And it's the way that you tell the story, the way that you're using the camera and the way that you're choosing your colors and the sounds and everything, that you're collaborating all together to create this beautiful visual image. That's the art. The craft, of course, is all the technical skills going into creating that and bringing all these pieces together that then the editor can combine together to create the actual film. And the third part that we never usually talk about, but that has become such a huge component of filmmakers, especially filmmakers who are working with their own production companies, and that's the finance. That is figuring out how much money it's going to take to make the film that you want to make and where you're going to find those funds. And if you can't find the funds that you ideally would love to have to make this movie that you dream of, but you can find some other smaller amount of money, then you go back to the art over here and you redesign and you reconfigure. How can you creatively get around the fact that you don't have enough money to make what you originally envisioned? So this is really, it's a three-part phase of creating films: art, craft, and budgeting.
So when we talk about this collaboration, okay, the director has a certain vision which is perhaps modified or supported or contributed with by the cinematographer, by the sound team, by the actors themselves, because they also improvise on characters. The director may have a certain character playing out in his mind in a certain way, but when it comes to the actors, they have their own interpretation, sometimes which is good, sometimes which is worse than so the director has to handle the actors also in a reasonable way that they don't fall out, but still stick to his vision. How important is the role of locations, costumes, sets, and the other paraphernalia in the whole scheme of things?
Yes, I'll talk about that in a second. Let's go back to the actors for a moment.
Okay.
So I've worked with amazing actors, and I've worked with actors who have not been quite as amazing. And ultimately, when I'm working with actors who don't seem to be getting it, I will try to relate the experience that's going on in this script to something in their actual personal life that they can relate to. So maybe they can find a way of identifying with the character to play out the scene that we're trying to film. Which is why, as the director, when I'm casting, I'm watching video of the auditions to make sure to see how this person actually looks like on film. If I haven't worked with them before, or if I haven't seen them in previous films before, I want to see what they actually look like, because we look different in person than we do when the camera captures our image. But if it turns out that this actor is struggling to create the story, to create the character that I want, if the dialogue doesn't sound right to me, if I don't believe what they're saying to be true, then I will go back and I'll work with the actor during those scenes to get them to really bring it into their own personal life so that they personally identify with what they are actually saying to the other actors in the scene. And ultimately, there have been times when I've just rewritten the script on the spot. If the actor
Mhm.
just wasn't getting it and it just wasn't working, I've been like, okay, this isn't working. Let's do this instead. And we
Mhm.
have adapted and rewritten to keep moving forward, because otherwise we're going to be stuck there and ultimately the actor may never get it. So it's like hitting your head against a wall. Don't do that. Regarding your earlier question about locations and props and so forth, I mean, everything that you see in the film contributes to how an audience feels. This is all about audience feelings. Film is manipulative. It is completely 100% manipulative, both subliminally and very blatantly. And the role of the director, and then the editor as well, is to get the audience to feel exactly what I want you to feel at exactly a certain point.
Mhm.
So everything that you're seeing on that screen is contributing to give you that sensation. Um, when we're in person, when you're talking to somebody in person, you can kind of get a feeling for who that person is simply by a sixth sense of being around that person. Well, we don't have that in film. It's a one-way street. We can't get
Mhm.
audience feedback. It's not like when we're on theater on stage and we can feel how the audience is responding to the performance.
Mhm.
That doesn't happen with film. We're just
Mhm.
broadcasting it out there. So that means that what I'm putting out there in films is completely and totally geared toward manipulating how you feel at every step along the movie.
Okay, so once the film is shot, the craft doesn't end there with the shooting of the film. Actually, the craft begins there because we have broken the script into pieces, and now those pieces are to be joined during the editing, the post production, and things are to be added. This is part two of the craft. How do you like where how do you rate this part of the craft? How important is it? As important as the earlier one, or more important than the earlier one?
So the director and all of the actors and all of the crew that are filming the movie are just creating material.
Mhm.
They're just gathering up the clay. It is in the process of editing the film where you actually make the movie. An editor has so much control and so much power over an actor's performance and the movie itself. Editors can make a wonderful actor seem terrible, and they can make a not so great actor much,
Mhm.
much better.
Mhm.
So, really, it's in the film's edit where you really make the movie. Everything before that was just gathering resources and supplies and materials. It's like going to an arts and crafts store and getting your construction paper and yarn and things like that. And now you're going to put this all together in the film, and that's the job of when you're editing. And what one thing about editing is that a single frame, let's assume that you're filming at a 24 frames per second ratio, which is
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
our standard is here in the United
Mhm.
States. Um, one single frame can make an amazing difference in whether or not it feels right or it feels strange. And so an edit is so incredibly specifically detailed.
Mhm.
Um, I edit my films, and it is a process where I stop doing anything else at all in my life, and I will go into 2 months of doing nothing but editing. That's all I
Mhm.
do. I eat, I sleep, I edit. And during that time period, my brain is thinking about nothing else except creating this movie. It is somewhat like the process of writing, because
Mhm.
you're dealing with raw material and you're putting it together into something that's cohesive to tell the story. One thing also is in editing, oftentimes the movie that was filmed doesn't match what the original script was, simply because of performances and locations not being available and so forth.
Mhm.
And so the editor can't follow the script. The editor has to look at what was actually filmed.
Mhm.
It's not the same as being there on the set as the director watching performances and thinking, oh, these are amazing. This is extraordinary. This is incredible. Well, then when you watch the footage, it was terrible. So then that's what you're editing. You're not editing what you experienced in person. You're editing what's actually there.